It has been said a million times by a million completely shocked husbands. My life was perfect until that one day it wasn't. Like them, I thought my life was perfect until one day it wasn't. I'm Blake Ramsey. At age 31, I was a happy and content man. At this stage of life, everything was going well. I had a great job working on space projects for an upstart aerospace division of a large aerospace company called Space Conquest, and I was making good money. We were working on a NASA contract to design the next-generation manned spacecraft after the SpaceX Dragon and the Boeing Starliner. It was going to be a winged space vehicle that landed like an airplane. Unlike the space shuttle, it would be for passengers, only 8 of them. It looks a little like the Air Force X-37 Billion, only bigger and with a canopy. Like the X-37 Billion, it would land entirely under automatic control, no pilot input whatsoever. My part of the design involved the escape system. In the event of a mishap, each crewman would eject in their own pressurized capsule. Egress could be initiated during any phase of flight, launch, and ascent, and at any time during re-entry. It was a space engineer's dream job. I had a beautiful wife of 7 years, named Tracy, and 3 beautiful children, a boy, 7, named Tyler, and twin girls, age 6, named Beth and Emily. My wife and children were the center of my life, and I went out of my way to make certain that my job did not interfere with my time with my family. My parents were alive and in good health, and so were Tracy's. Both sets of parents lived within an hour's drive and doted on their grandchildren when they could. Also, Tracy's married sister Lucy lived close by. Tracy and I had a 4-bedroom home in an upper-middle-class neighborhood with great neighbors. Tyler had his own room, while the twins shared a room. We kept the 4th bedroom for guests. Eventually, each girl would need their own bedroom. When that time came, we would finish the basement into an in-law suite. I met my lovely wife Tracy during my postgraduate year of college. Between my undergraduate degree and my master's degree, I served 4 years in the Marine Corps in order to qualify for the veteran educational benefits. She was a junior, and we quickly fell in love. We married a month after her graduation. I graduated with an aerospace engineering degree and found a great job. When Tracy graduated from school, she went to work for a law firm as a legal assistant. Tracy quit her job 2 years later when she gave birth to our son, Tyler. Only 1 year later, Tracy gave birth to our twin daughters. Our life was perfect until Beth and Emily went to kindergarten. With all the kids in school, Tracy went back to work at the law firm. I should have seen it coming, but was blinded by my belief in my wife's total fidelity. I thought she was in love with me as much as I was in love with her. Looking back, all the signs were staring me in the face. Tracy started dressing more provocatively. Our intimate life went from frequent to much less frequent. Tracy was working more hours and dismissive when I questioned her about her excessive time at work. When I confronted her about the lack of quality time with both me and our children, she told me that she was working for the senior partner. She would tell me it was a great opportunity for her career and would help us financially in our future. On several occasions before the day I met her boss, Stanley Cross, at a couple of social events and the company Christmas party. He was the senior partner who started the law firm that bore his name, Stanley Cross and Associates, attorneys at law. To me, he was unpleasant. He was arrogant and dismissive towards me. I instantly distrusted him. The few times that I dropped into Tracy's office to take her to lunch, Cross seemed possessive of her and only reluctantly let her out of the office. I watched for any romantic interaction between Tracy and her boss. If there was any, I didn't note it at the time. The situation worsened just as the twins were finishing up their kindergarten year. After their last day of school, Tyler, Beth, and Emily were going to spend the weekend with my parents. I was looking forward to a nice weekend with Tracy to try to rekindle our relationship and spend time together. I picked up the kids from school and dropped them off at my parents' home before I returned home for what I planned was to be a nice dinner and movie alone with Tracy. As I walked into the kitchen, Tracy was coming down the stairs. She was dressed in a stylish black cocktail dress with a low neckline emphasizing her C-plus rack. She wore black, elegant high heels. Her hair was down around her shoulders, styled to perfection. She had put on makeup for a night out. She looked extremely attractive. "Wow, babe, you look amazing. If you would have told me we were going out, I would have come home earlier. Give me a few minutes to freshen up and change my clothes, and I will be ready to go." "Where are we heading to?" Tracy got a sly smile on her face that was not a good look for her. She emphasized we are not going anywhere. However, she emphasized, am going out, but just not with you. I was shocked. What are you saying? I have a date with my boss, Stanley Cross, and this is just the beginning. We will be setting new boundaries starting today. Stan is coming to pick me up for a night on the town. I won't be home tonight or Saturday night. We have a suite downtown. I'll be back sometime Sunday afternoon. What on earth are you saying? I exclaimed. You need to calm down and accept this. This is the way it is going to be. I'm going out and will be home Sunday afternoon. No way. If you think I'm going to stand for this, you're mistaken. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. No, Blake, I will be coming home to our home. We are going to remain married and I will still live here, as will you. You need to understand that I still love you, but I need something more. If you insist on making this difficult, it will be you who will not live here anymore. It would be a shame for our children's father to be penniless and in jail. Now, you need to sit down with me and let me explain the changes that have been made that you're going to have to adjust to. I want to do this the easy way before Stan gets here in about 30 minutes. If he has to explain things to you, you will like it even less. I responded, if that man is going to be here in 30 minutes, he is going to see the consequences in 31 minutes. You don't want to do that, Blake. Tracy replied confidently for 2 reasons. First, you really do have to listen to what he has to say about what he can do to you if you don't cooperate. And second, he will have Max with him. Max is his driver and bodyguard. He is big and intimidating and doesn't have a sense of humor. If you harm Stan, you will end up in the hospital. I suddenly had a feeling I hadn't experienced since my time in the Marine Corps. I didn't identify it at first, but then it came to me. I'm being ambushed. I have my wife on one side and soon I will have Stanley Cross on the other. I will be caught in their crossfire. They seem to have the advantage of pre-planning and surprise, and I'm at a loss as to how to defend myself. I pushed past Tracy and hurried up the stairs. Where do you think you're going? Tracy demanded. We need to talk. I'm going to wash my face and change my clothes. I will be down in 5 minutes. During my time as a Marine in the Middle East, I had been ambushed 3 times. I had made several rules about being ambushed. 1. Try to see it before you get trapped. In the case of Tracy and Stanley Cross, I didn't see it coming. The second rule, take cover immediately. That was what I was doing by leaving the front room and seeking temporary safety in my bedroom. The third rule was, come up with a plan to extricate yourself and your team. I needed a plan. I made one. First, I changed from my suit into casual pants and a comfortable sport shirt. Then, I set my iPhone up to record and slipped it into my pocket. Next, I went to my walk-in closet and kneeled down to where my shoes were sitting on top of an old footlocker. Stenciled on the top was Captain BC. Ramsey USMC. I swept all the shoes from the top of the footlocker and reached behind it for a key I had taped to the back. I opened the footlocker, and immediately, 10 years of memories came flooding back to me as I saw my old uniforms. A passing thought reminded me that I knew I could still fit comfortably into all my uniforms even after storing them away 10 years before. Below the uniforms, there were several expandable filing folders, and under them, a box containing my medals awards for 2 tours of combat duty in the Middle East. I opened the box briefly, but I was there for something else. Under the box of medals was the prize I was looking for, Betsy, my Marine Corps Beretta 9mm sidearm. It was in a cloth-lined plastic pouch, along with 2 clips of 9 bullets each. Officially, I was not allowed to keep my pistol, but a fluke in the quartermaster system as I was being discharged allowed me to do so. This particular gun had special meaning to me. It saved my life multiple times in combat. As I loaded a clip into the handle, I heard Tracy at the bottom of the stairs. "Get down here now, Blake, or you'll regret it," I replied. "I'll be right down. Get a beer ready for me, please." I stood up and prepared my gun. I attached it inside my waistband at the small of my back and covered it with my shirt. Unless you were looking for it, it would go unnoticed. As I made my way out of the bedroom, I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket, started recording, then placed it back in my pocket with the camera lens just showing over the edge. I wanted to know exactly what Tracy had in mind and what plans she and Stanley Cross had for me. I decided to apply some of the interrogation techniques I had learned in the Marine Corps as part of my training. I was going to be as calm and non-confrontational as possible and encourage her to talk, to explain how she perceived the situation. When I entered the living room, I found Tracy sitting at the dining room table with a glass of white wine in front of her and a cold beer waiting for me. "You're finally here," she scolded. "We need to get some things out of the way before Stan arrives." "It seems like you have a lot to say." "Tracy," I said, "tell me about this new reality that you expect me to accept." "First of all, I want you to remember that I love you more than anything in the world, and I want us to grow old and spend the rest of our lives together. I really don't want to hurt your feelings, honey," she started before I interrupted. "No more terms of endearment, Tracy. I'm not honey or dear or sweetheart. Just call me Blake and I will call you Tracy." Tracy looked slightly offended at my lack of affection, but she continued. "Again, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but circumstances have changed as of this evening. And you have to accept the changes or else. You should know that Stan and I have become very close since he made me his personal assistant. Yes, we have developed a strong connection. We have been spending a lot of time together for almost 7 months now. He started showing interest in me soon after I returned to work as a secretary. We started having coffee together during breaks. When he made me his executive secretary, we began spending even more time together. It was flattering that such a successful and important man wanted to spend time with me. One day after work hours, when I was in his office, he made a move. He grabbed me and started showing affection. His charm and attractive appearance were hard to resist. We shared a moment together. I realized that I enjoyed it a lot, and I didn't want it to end. "Apparently, you didn't think twice about being unfaithful or betraying me," I said. Tracy replied, "I'm sorry, Blake, but I didn't. That doesn't mean that I don't love you. You are still the person I want to spend my life with." I took a sip of my drink and said, "Good luck making that happen." "Tell me, Tracy," I continued, "why, after 7 months of successfully hiding this from me, have you now decided to be open about it? You could have continued without me ever finding out." "Until now, Blake, our encounters have been in secret, in Stan's office, in his car, or in hotels. We both thought it was time to change that. We want to be open about our relationship and enjoy it to the fullest. That means spending nights together, going out in public, and traveling together as a couple. The only way to do that is if you are on board with our lifestyle." I took another sip and said, "Again, good luck making that happen." No. Blake." Tracy leaned forward and tried to hold my hands. "There will be no divorce. We are going to stay married. You just have to accept the fact that Stan and I will be spending a lot of time together. I will be staying with him overnight at least 1 to 2 nights a week. Sometimes we will go on weekend trips together, and occasionally I may accompany him on longer vacations to Europe or the Caribbean or somewhere else. Plus, as his personal assistant, I will get to travel with Stan and meet a lot of important people. I will attend his business meetings and be his companion at social events with influential friends. Stan is compensating me generously. It will benefit both of us. Think about all the things we will be able to afford: vacations, our children's education. We will finally be able to upgrade the cabin on the lake like we always talked about." I replied. "Do you think I would want any of those things paid for with the money earned by someone Stan is involved with?" "I'm not involved with him just for money," Tracy responded angrily. "I am an asset to the company. I am the confidant Stan needs as he leads his law firm. This kind of relationship is part of his life as a powerful and influential man. I'm proud that such a successful man believes I can be his partner. And you should be proud too. Besides, this relationship might not last forever. I believe it will last at most 2 or 3 years. After that, it will be just like before. I will be your faithful wife again, and we will enjoy our family together for many years to come. You should also know that Stan wants to befriend you. He wants to be a part of the family and be like an uncle to our children." Internally, I felt furious, but I maintained my composure. I stated firmly, "He will never be involved with or talk to my kids ever." "Do you understand me clearly?" And then it hit me. So I had to ask, why would he want to be close to my family? Doesn't he have a family of his own? Tracy answered, "Stan is married to a wonderful woman who is much younger than him. She comes from a prominent family. Their marriage was more of a practical arrangement, but unfortunately, She is unable to have children. Maybe he should consider adoption and not interfere with other people's marriages, I reasoned. He wants to have his own children, preferably a son to pass on his legacy, but he believes that a child should be raised in a loving family environment. Then Tracy lowered her head. "Oh God, I can't believe what I'm hearing," I said, getting angrier as I grasped Tracy's point. Then I realized what she meant. He wants to have a child with you, doesn't he? And he expects me to act as the father to his child. It wouldn't be just his child, Tracy stated firmly. It would be our baby, and we would both love and care for it because we love each other. The child would have our last name. Stan would provide financial support for the child until they finish college. "Oh no, are you already expecting?" I asked. "No," she answered, "but he wants me to stop taking birth control in a few months. I told him I wanted you to be on board with our new relationship before we consider that." This situation just keeps getting worse, I said to myself. Once again, I firmly stated, "Good luck making that happen." Tracy was angry. "Stop saying that," she demanded. "I understand that's how you feel right now, Blake, but we hope you'll change your mind as time goes on." I was shocked by her words. Just as I stood up to confront her, the doorbell rang. Tracy hurried to the door, letting her boss in. As he entered, he embraced her around the waist and affectionately touched her backside. "This situation just keeps getting worse," I said to myself again. "How did he take it?" asked Tracy. "Not well. I think you need to explain the consequences of non-compliance," she said. I heard him reply, "Then we'll go to plan B." Shock and awe. Stan was an imposing man. I was 5 feet 11 inches, he was several inches taller, and he was a bit overweight. I wondered why Tracy was so taken with his physique. I suppose his long, wavy, graying hair made him appear distinguished. He looked confident in his black 3-piece suit, and he had an overbearing air about him. His appearance and confident voice were well suited for the courtroom. He walked right up to me, even entering my personal space. "Mr. Ramsey, I guess we need to have a conversation. I need to ask you some questions. You could try, and from the looks of you, I might get a couple of good hits in before my driver would storm in here and confront you. By evening, you would be in jail, so sit down." I looked out the door to see a large man standing on my doorstep. I wasn't intimidated, but I wanted to hear what he had to say, so, muttering, I sat down. "Good, we can talk like civilized men now. When your wife agreed to become my personal assistant, she took on other duties." "Yes, I'm talking about spending time together. I've been spending a lot of time with your wife for the last 6 months. But we grew tired of sneaking around. The two of you will have a new relationship. As my personal assistant, she will provide me with professional and personal services as I need them. Mr. Ramsey, you will continue to be Tracy's husband. Your role as husband and father will not change with one exception. I will take care of Tracy's personal desires. Most of the time those needs will be taken care of at a hotel or at the office, but there will be some times when you are out of the house that we will need to use your bed, you cruel person. What makes you think I will stand still for this? I will divorce her cheater before putting up with any of this." "Mr. Ramsey, that kind of talk is not productive. Don't forget what business I'm in. I'm a big-time lawyer with the power of this city's largest law firm. If you try to divorce her, you will face consequences. I don't just mean in the divorce. Of course, in the divorce. We will take everything from you and force you to provide support while she will keep spending time with me. Your wonderful little son and the twin daughters you cherish so much. You won't be seeing them very much, if at all. You see, you will be charged with child endangerment. You will face legal consequences, and you will never visit with your children again. I'm sure your company will fire you on the spot. Further, you will be abandoned by your family and friends." I sat there stunned, not knowing what to say. I had no idea Tracy and this person were prepared to go so far to promote their open relationship. Stan continued, "Now, I know you are not going to do anything foolish. If you try to tell my wife, all the troubles I just explained to you will come down on your head, plus a visit from my driver and his friends, after which you will probably be unable to walk, much less spend time with a woman. If you try to just leave town, my private investigators will hunt you down. So be wise and just accept this new relationship. Your wife is an exceptional assistant." He moved in close to my ear. "And she is very talented." I turned to Tracy and asked, "Would you really do these things to me?" She answered, I wouldn't want to, Blake, and I won't have to, as long as you cooperate. After a while, you will see that it will become a new normal, and you won't think twice about these arrangements. Still stunned, I watched as my wife and the person walked towards the door. He picked up her overnight bag and was almost out of the door when I interrupted them. Before you go, I have a few things you should know. Irritated and rolling his eyes in silent contempt, the person said, "What is it? And be quick." I started, "After I have a strong drink or two and process the breakdown of my marriage, I'm going to call your wife and tell her everything you don't want her to hear." Then I addressed Tracy. "Next, I'm going to call your sister, Lucy, and tell her all the same things. I will let her tell your parents." The person wasn't certain he heard me correctly because it went counter to everything he was accustomed to when he tried to manipulate me. "What did you say?" he asked. Without repeating myself, I continued. "Early Saturday morning, I'm going to call a locksmith and have all of the locks changed now." Tracy was listening and trying to comprehend what was happening. "After the locks are changed, I'm going to walk down the block to Kate's house and ask her out for a night of dinner, dancing and drinks. I never told you, but she has been showing interest in me, starting only a few months after her husband passed away. She may be a little older than me, and she doesn't have the movie star face that you do, but she has a fantastic body. She has even modeled one of her bikinis for me. Up to an hour ago, I wouldn't have considered stepping out on you, Tracy. But things have changed, haven't they?" Tracy formed a hurt look on her face and stuttered, "Blake, you can't do that," I continued. "When you two return on Sunday afternoon, you will find all of Tracy's belongings in the middle of the front yard. That includes everything she owns, all of her clothes, shoes, personal articles, cosmetics, jewelry, and even our wedding album. And they won't be in plastic trash bags either. You should probably make arrangements to pick them up before Monday morning at 4 a.m., because that's when the automatic sprinklers go off." Now, the person was starting to boil. He turned red and clenched his fists because he couldn't believe that all the threats he made to me were worthless. Tracy's face took on a pained expression. One last thing, I was ready to conclude my response. "On Monday morning, I'm going to make an appointment with a divorce lawyer. Not only am I going to file for divorce due to adultery, but I am going to name you, Stanley, as a co-respondent. Further, I'm going to file a lawsuit against you for emotional distress and another lawsuit against your firm for violating your company's policies. I assume a company as large as yours has one, and even if these two lawsuits are dismissed, which is likely, they will publicly embarrass you and your firm and diminish you, Stanley, in the eyes of your peers." The person was furious. He tossed the overnight bag against the wall and walked over to me purposely, again getting into my personal space. He poked my chest hard with 2 fingers. It took all the self-restraint I had not to retaliate. "Listen," he started, "you obviously don't have the slightest idea who you are dealing with or how determined I can be with someone I want to defeat. I am Stanley Cross. I run the biggest law firm in the county. I can legally ruin you in a day. By the time Tracy and I get to our hotel, you will be under arrest for any number of charges. You might believe that if you are innocent that you can fight me. You can't. I've been practicing law in this state for 30 years. I know most of the senior police officials personally. I am friends with many of the attorneys in the DA's office. Most of the judges in this city either owe me favors or know that I have information on them. Even the politicians are on my side because I have often helped them get elected one way or another. Stanley was on a roll and I didn't want to stop him. If you go out tomorrow evening with your friend Kate, you will be stopped by the police and they will find a reason to search your car. There is a good chance that they will find some illegal substances. The Vice unit is going to get a tip that you have inappropriate content on your computer. And that is just the beginning. How long and how expensive will it be for you to fight these charges? You won't be able to find a lawyer anywhere that would want to go up against me. You will never recover. Meanwhile, I will still be spending time with your wife. Do you understand? I totally believe everything you say." Stanley addressed me again. "You need to show me a little more respect. You are to call me Sir or Mr. Cross. If you call me something disrespectful one more time, there will be consequences." When Cross said this, he slapped me twice with his right hand to try to threaten me. The second time he did this, I grabbed his hand with my left hand and, in one quick motion, used my other hand to push his fingers back. I bent them all the way back to where they were resting on the back of his wrist, and I held them there. Cross couldn't believe it. For a split second, he was totally surprised and looked at his hand incredulously. Then the pain hit him, and he screeched. I pushed him away, and he tumbled onto the couch. Tracy came to help him. He unfolded his fingers and held his flattened hand against his chest. He rocked back and forth with pain. You will pay for this. I'm not finished with you. Remembering his bodyguard, standing just outside the closed front door, he yelled, "Max, get in here." The front door opened immediately, and in walked Max. He was big and looked strong. "Yes, Mr. Cross," he said. Cross pointed to me with his good hand and said, "Take care of him, Max." "Yes, Mr. Cross," Max answered, and he started across the living room toward me. Tracy tried to protest, but Cross was having none of it and brushed her aside. I had anticipated an argument like this when Tracy first mentioned that Cross would have his bodyguard with him, and I knew I might face some abuse from him. This was going to be bad, however. Almost no one who knows me knows that I was a prisoner of war in Afghanistan. Although it was only for 17 days, it still counted, and I was still awarded the POW medal. During that time, my captors used me as a punching bag. I was the only American they could get their hands on, and they intended to take out their hatred on me. But I learned one thing: I can endure abuse. In fact, it is much easier to handle a beating than it is to be tied up in a stress position for hours at a time. The real torture was the nights I spent hanging from a beam in the ceiling of my cell with my arms pulled so tightly behind me that my elbows touched. The pain was excruciating and constant. So, by comparison, a beating was easy to handle. I stood my ground and, without defending myself, watched Max throw his powerful hand and unleash it toward my head. He hit me square in the nose. I fell against the coffee table, stunned. I touched my nose and looked at my hand. Blood was everywhere. It was dripping onto my shirt and pants and onto the beige carpet. I absent-mindedly thought, can this blood be washed out, or will I have to get a new carpet? I was obviously hurt, and Max didn't know whether or not he was allowed to continue hitting me. He looked across for guidance. "Hurt him, Max. Hurt him badly," was what he was told. Max reached for me and grabbed my hair. He stood me up in front of him and hit me again, this time in my left eye. I went down again. When I looked up, all I could see out of my left eye was shadows. I knew I couldn't endure any more abuse like this and remained conscious and reasonably alert. Max looked down at me and wondered if I could get up. I looked up at him and said, "You hit like a girl." Now, his ego was bruised in front of his employer. He grabbed me by the hair again and stood me in front of him. I watched as his right hand came for another strike. You should have been there to see the surprised expression on Max's face when I shot him in the foot. The blast of the 9mm semi-automatic did not surprise just Max. The sound of the gun sounded like a thunderclap in the enclosed room. It was quickly followed by the smell of gunpowder similar to the smell of fireworks on the 4th of July. Max dropped me immediately, grabbed his foot and started hopping backwards until he fell into my favorite leather Laz Z-Boy chair. I fell to the ground again, gun in hand. I saw the expression change on Max's face when he realized that he was in a gunfight. He looked at me with a scowl and started to reach inside his coat pocket for his gun. I shouted, "Don't do it, Max," and pointed my gun at him. When his gun cleared his holster and I could see it, I shot Max again. Another thunderclap and more smoke. If Max had been 25 feet away from me, I would have aimed for his midsection and fired 2 or 3 times. As it was, Max was only 8 feet away from me, so I could choose my target. I shot him in his right shoulder. He dropped his gun in his lap and screamed. I quickly crawled over to him, picked up his gun and put it in my pocket. Then, I put the barrel of my gun firmly against his temple and said, "How many men have you killed?" Max could feel the hot barrel at his temple, and he was afraid. He shook his head left and right, indicating that he had never killed anyone. "You should know, then, Max, that I've killed 27 men. All of them were soldiers fighting for their religion and their country, so I had some respect for them. How much respect do you think I have for you?" Max shook his head left and right again. "That's right, Max, none," I said. "So there isn't much reason I shouldn't harm you, is there?" Max screamed. "I have a family." I replied, "Well, Max, I have a family too, and you didn't seem to have much regard for mine. I wouldn't doubt that your family wouldn't be better off in the long run if you died today. Please," he begged. I looked at Max's shoulder and said, "I shot you right through your shoulder, Max. You're going to bleed out if I don't get you to a doctor within an hour or so. And if I do, well, don't worry, those orthopedic doctors can fix anything with all the plastic and ceramic replacement bones they make. Hopefully you won't have to learn to eat, write, and shoot your gun with your left hand. However, you're probably going to have some mobility problems with that arm for the rest of your life. If you ever feel a twinge of pain in that arm in the future, I want you to think of me. Further, if I ever see you again, I will assume you want to harm me, and I will deal with you first. Do you understand?" Max nodded that he understood. I pulled his right shoulder forward roughly to see the back of the wound. Max cringed with pain. "Geez, Max." I lamented. "The bullet went clean through your shoulder and through my favorite easy chair, and you're bleeding all over it. I don't know if I can clean it all up or even fix the hole in my chair. If I have to get a new chair, I'm going to be even more frustrated than I am right now." I should not have played with Max as long as I did, but he hurt me and I wanted him to suffer. The mistake I made was leaving an enemy at my back. The first thing that reminded me of that error was a warning from Tracy. "Blake, look out." I turned with my gun hand raised to see Cross bringing a fireplace poker down on my head. Without a doubt, he would have killed me if my arm had not protected my head. However, the poker struck my right forearm and from the pain, I knew it was broken. The force of the blow caused me to release my gun and it dropped onto the floor. Cross's attention became focused on the gun, now laying a few feet away from him. Before he could make a move toward it, I brought my left closed fist straight up into his groin. It was a forceful blow and lifted him 2 inches off of the ground. He fell to the floor in great pain. I retrieved my gun with my left hand and was on him in an instant. I straddled his chest and put my gun to his mouth. "Open your mouth," I commanded. Cross wouldn't do it. He kept his lips shut tightly and moved his head back and forth to say he was not going to do it. So I hit him in the mouth very hard with the barrel of the gun. I cut his lip badly and broke several teeth, including his eye teeth. He opened his mouth and I shoved the barrel of my gun as far as I could down his throat to the point that he had trouble breathing. "How do you like my version of shock and awe, jerk?" I asked. If you were listening to what I told Max, you heard that I have officially killed 27 men in combat. I want to point out to you that I killed 7 of them with this gun. And before you think about struggling too hard to get away, I should also tell you that this gun responds to a trigger pull of only 4 ounces, and I already have 2 ounces of pressure on the trigger with that. Cross stopped his efforts to get away from me. "Now, jerk, where is your cell phone?" I asked. Cross indicated that it was in his left coat pocket. I took it out. "Turn it on, jerk," I told him. He took it and using his thumbprint turned it on. "Now, jerk, call your wife on FaceTime." Cross's eyes enlarged to the size of quarters, but he did what I told him to do. The phone rang a few times before a woman answered. "Stanley, why are you calling me at this time of?" "Who are you?" the woman said, as she saw a bloody face she did not recognize. "Mrs. Cross," I said, "my name is Blake Ramsey. You don't know me, but perhaps you know my wife, Tracy Ramsey. She is the personal assistant for your husband, Mrs. Cross answered, "Yes, I know Tracy. She's a very sweet lady. What is this all about? Why is your face so bloodied, and where is my husband?" "I'm sitting on your husband, Mrs. Cross, and I have a gun in his mouth." I turned the phone so that it showed her the face of her husband. "My goodness," she shouted into the phone. "Don't hurt him." "Listen, Mrs. Cross, I don't have much time. You should know that my wife and your husband have been spending a lot of time together inappropriately for the last 6 or 7 months. They told me today that they were going to go to a hotel for the weekend and spend time together. When I objected to that, your husband had Max attack me. Unfortunately for Max, I had to shoot him, and now I'm considering shooting your husband. My husband is supposed to be at our desert home in Palm Springs this weekend working on a case he has to present in court next week. He lied to you, Mrs. Cross. He is right here on the floor of my house right now. Oh, and this is my wife, Tracy." I turned the phone so Mrs. Cross could see my wife sitting on the sofa with her hands on her cheeks and a terrified look on her face. As you can see, Mrs. Cross, my wife is in a very fashionable dress and ready for a night out with your husband before they go to the hotel he booked for tonight and Saturday night, Mrs. Cross responded, "I can't believe this is happening." I was surprised, too. I joked. I finished, "I have to hang up now, Mrs. Cross. The police will be here soon. It was nice talking with you." I threw the cell phone onto the floor and turned my attention back to Cross. "Well, jerk, it seems that your wife is now somewhat aware of your extramarital activities. Now, what were you going to do if I said anything to her?" "Oh yes, you were going to have Max and a few of his friends pay me a visit, after which I would be injured and humiliated." Looking over at Max, I said, "Max probably won't be able to do that for a while." Then, shoving the barrel of my gun further into Cross's mouth, I brought my head really close to his. "Listen to this, jerk. If you send anyone after me, I will harm them. I will harm them all. And then I will come after you. Is that clear, jerk?" Cross nodded his head affirmatively. I took the gun out of his mouth. At that point, I smelled something foul, like garbage. I looked down at Cross. "Did you just have an accident?" I laughed. "Between the mess on my carpet and now this, I'm going to have to get a new one." I looked at Tracy. "Bring my briefcase to me, please," bade nervously. Tracy picked up my briefcase from where I had left it when I first came home. When she set it down next to me, I opened it and pulled out my laptop. "Is this the computer you were going to load up with inappropriate content, jerk?" Cross-eyed the computer but didn't say anything. I turned the laptop over so I could see the bottom of it and locate the hard drive. Then, I set it down next to Cross's head and put 2 bullets through it. The blast from my gun surprised everyone once again, and again the smell of gun smoke pervaded the room. The muzzle wasn't more than a foot from Cross's left ear. He covered his ear and screamed as the eardrum was no doubt ruptured. I leaned down to his right ear and said, "Try loading this computer with anything now, jerk." I climbed off of Cross and ordered him to sit on the sofa. He did so while still holding his groin with one hand and his left ear with the other. Next, I ordered Tracy to get a wet towel from the kitchen and help stop the bleeding from Max's shoulder. She hurried to the kitchen and returned within a minute to administer to Max. Then, I told everyone to remain exactly where they were, otherwise I would shoot them, while I went to the kitchen to clean up my face. Once in the kitchen, I pulled out my cell phone. It was still recording. I trained it on my face as the last 1% of power drained from the battery. I looked at my phone and said to myself, I can't let the police get their hands on this recording. If they do, and Cross has as much influence with the police as he said he did, then I could imagine the recording being erased. I had to hide it. I quickly opened the bottom kitchen drawer to the right of the sink and placed the phone in the folds of a pile of clean dish towels. There was little chance of it being discovered there accidentally. Finally, I soaked a dish towel in water and wiped my face. My nose was caked with dried blood and it was still bleeding. My eye was badly swollen and I couldn't see anything out of it anymore, not even shadows. And my head hurt. I wondered whether or not I might have a concussion. I was only gone a minute, and when I re-entered the living room, everyone was still in their place. Cross was still suffering and rocking forward and back while holding his ear and his groin. Tracy was tending to Max. She had managed to get his jacket off and had his shirt pulled down from his wounded shoulder. All of you stay where you are until the police arrive. They should be here in a few minutes. I imagine they will have an ambulance not far behind with that. I stepped outside onto my porch. The first thing I saw was several of my neighbors lined up on the sidewalk. One of them said, "Were those gunshots we heard?" "Blake," I said, "Yes, they were. Has anybody called 911?" 2 people raised their hands. One of my neighbors was retired Marine Colonel Orson Sage. We were the best of friends and often enjoyed a drink together. I always called him Colonel, and he always called me Captain. "Are you hurt?" Captain the Colonel said. "You should see the other guys," I answered. In the distance I could hear sirens. I knew the police would be here in only a few minutes. "Colonel," I called. "Would you mind doing me a favor?" "I need some help, of course, Captain," he answered, and walked from the sidewalk to the steps of my porch. "First of all, can you help me unload these guns and put them on the porch table? I don't want to be seen waving one of them around as the police pull up." The Colonel took my gun from my hand and the one I retrieved from my pocket. He quickly removed the rounds from Betsy, cycled the bullet out of the chamber, and then put them on the table. Next, he unloaded Max's revolver and put the gun and bullets next to the semi-automatic. Kate, a widowed neighbor from up the street, saw that I had been beaten badly and approached with the intention of helping me. While they were both there, I turned to the colonel and said, "I wish I had time to explain everything to you, but I don't. You should know that I was in a fight with my wife's boyfriend. He is a powerful lawyer and threatened to fill my car up with illegal substances and then let the cops catch me." I gave the colonel my keys. "If you would, after this situation is over, and sometime late tonight, and if they haven't put crime scene tape around the garage, take my car and hide it for me. The code to the garage door is the same number as my street address." "Will do, Captain," he replied. Kate interrupted the conversation. "You don't look good, Blake. My head is starting to hurt, and I'm beginning to get dizzy," I answered. "Maybe I was hit harder than I thought I was." Kate helped me sit down on the porch steps, just as two police cars pulled up with their red and blue lights flashing and their sirens wailing. They made their way through the neighbors who, for the most part, were standing on the sidewalk and the other side of the street. They approached the house with their hands on their guns. The colonel assured them that there was no danger and pointed to the unloaded guns on the porch table. They asked if there was anyone inside, and I said yes. There are 3 people and one of them has been shot and needs medical attention. One police officer looked at me and said, "It looks like you need some medical attention." 2 at that time. 2 ambulances arrived on the scene. They also had their lights flashing and sirens blaring. Immediately, 2 or 3 emergency technicians were out of their vehicles, across the yard and up onto the porch. One of the police officers who was inside the house came out to meet them and said there was a man with 2 gunshot wounds in the living room. The technicians vanished into the house to do their job. Meanwhile, my head was starting to spin faster and faster. Kate told me to lie down. One of the technicians was hovering over me and started to look at my face. I told him I thought my right forearm was broken. I was only half conscious sometime later when the medics wheeled Max out on a stretcher. I vaguely recall seeing Cross being helped to an ambulance with his coat wrapped around his waist. Next, Tracy was escorted out of the house and toward a police car by a female officer. She stopped suddenly when she saw me lying on the porch with 2 medics looking after me. She was crying. I guess the sight of my face made her stop and pull away from her escort. "Blake, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This isn't what I wanted," she wailed. "I didn't want you to get hurt." She tried to bend down to touch me, but I held up my good hand and pushed her away. "Go away, Tracy," is all I said. Then her handler caught her and pulled her toward the police cruiser. I don't know if I passed out or a medic gave me something to ease the pain. Whatever happened, I was out for 3 days. When I first woke up, my vision was blurry, but I was looking into the eyes of an angel in white. As my vision cleared a little, I noted that she was actually an older angel, but she was beautiful all the same. "Mr. Blake, can you hear me?" she said. "I am so happy you are back with us. I guess I'm in a hospital," I said. "Yes," she answered. "You are at Mercy General Hospital in Midtown. You've been sleeping for 3 days, 3 days, 3 days," I exclaimed as I became a little more aware of my surroundings. "Yes, that long. I'm going to get the doctor. He will explain it all to you. Just relax. By the way, my name is Rose." While I was alone in the room, I started taking stock of myself. My right forearm was in a cast that went from my elbow to my lower wrist. With my good hand, I felt my face. I had gauze and tape on my left eye and covering my nose. Touching either my eye or my nose was painful. Other than my head and arm injuries, I seemed all right. However, I was hooked up to several machines that beeped regularly. One machine was giving me a saline drip. Looking under the covers, I noted I was hooked up to a catheter. Finally, I had a blood pressure sleeve on my arm that would inflate and deflate regularly. As I finished the analysis of myself, Rose reappeared with the doctor who identified himself as Dr. York. The condensed version of his description of my condition was that I had a simple fracture of my right forearm, a broken nose that probably would not be too disfiguring Dr. Humor, and my eye was black and blue, and swollen shut. Everything would heal. He had kept me sedated for 3 days because he believed I had a minor concussion and he wanted my brain to rest. Since it was late at night when I awoke, he decided to give me something that would make me sleep until morning. A few minutes later, I was out. When I woke up in the morning, I had a surprise. My left wrist was handcuffed to the bed rail. "What in the world?" I exclaimed as I realized what it was and pulled at it. "Relax, mister," Ramsey, a voice said. As I looked around the room, I saw a middle-aged man in a suit with his tie pulled loose. "They told me you'd wake up about now," he said. "What's going on? Why am I handcuffed to my hospital bed?" "I don't think it's because you were afraid that I'd fall out. I am Detective Sergeant Hardman," the man said. "And no, Mr. Ramsey, we were not worried about you falling out of bed. We were concerned that you might try to escape." "Escape? Does it look like I'm in any shape to run anywhere? And why would I try to escape in the first place?" "You are handcuffed because you are under arrest," I exclaimed again. "Yes, you are under arrest for assault with intent to commit murder, assault with a deadly weapon, assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, domestic abuse, and a handful of lesser charges, such as unlawful discharge of a firearm. Later today, after you have been seen by your doctor, you are going to be moved to a secure ward on the 3rd floor. Your handcuffs will be removed at that time." "And just where did all these charges come from?" I demanded to know. "The complaint was originally filed by Mr. Stanley Cross on behalf of himself, a Mr. Dax Angel, and your wife, Tracy Ramsey. I should have suspected," I said quietly to myself. "Before we proceed," the detective said, "I need to inform you of your Miranda rights." The detective read me my rights as required and then left the room. A few minutes later, Rose entered the room and silently attended to my needs. "Did you know about this, Rose?" I asked, showing her my handcuffs. "Yes, Mr. Ramsey," she replied. "I'm so sorry, none of it is true, Rose. Trust me, and I'll take you out for dinner. Once this is all resolved, I'll believe you then." "It better be a fancy restaurant," she joked. A few hours later, Dr. York visited me and assured me that I would recover with time. He informed me that I would be transferred to another ward soon under the care of a different doctor. Shortly afterwards, Detective Hardman returned with several hospital staff. I was wheeled up to the 3rd floor, passing a uniformed police officer guarding the secure entrance, and into a small private room. Since the room had a lock on the outside, the handcuffs were unnecessary. I was then reconnected to the hospital machines. Before leaving, the detective informed me that in a few days, when I had improved, I would be arraigned via closed-circuit TV with the court and a judge, where I could enter my plea. He asked if I had a lawyer, to which I responded that I didn't. He assured me that a representative from the public defender's office would come for an initial interview, and I could decide how to proceed after that. During my free time to think, I reflected upon how drastically my life had taken a sharp turn. I mourned the sudden loss of my wife, and at night, I cried over the abrupt end of my marriage. Thoughts of my children also weighed heavily on my mind. Where were they? What were they being told? Who was taking care of them? I also wondered about the status of my job. I had been absent for 4 days without notifying anyone of my prolonged absence. However, the hospital staff attending to me couldn't provide any answers to my questions. On the 5th day in the hospital, I received a visit from the public defender's office. A young lawyer named Sam Wilton, specializing in criminal law, explained that he was familiar with my case and had extensive information to share. First, he listed the charges against me, which were the same ones outlined by the detective. Having a written copy of the charges was helpful. Sam then informed me that I would be arraigned the following morning and asked about my plea. Before I could respond, he mentioned that if I agreed to plead guilty to most of the lesser charges, he might be able to negotiate a deal with the district attorney's office. Interrupting him midway, I emphatically declared my innocence. I inquired about my children. Apparently, after my wife's statement to the police, she was released. Her sister, Lucy, had picked her up, and they stayed with Lucy and her husband until the crime scene investigators cleared our house for occupancy. As of then, my kids had not been informed about the situation other than the fact that I would be away from the family for some time. Regarding my job, I provided Sam with my company's contact information and instructed him to explain what had happened to my boss. While reviewing the charges against me, I noticed something the detective had mentioned but hadn't quite registered at the time. "What is this charge of spousal abuse?" I asked. Sam revealed that Stanley Cross had added that to his complaint after Tracy alleged that I had struck her multiple times. Sam had visual evidence, including photographs of Tracy's injuries. Among them were pictures displaying pronounced black and blue bruises on her left cheek and a purple bruise on her upper left forearm. "I didn't do that to her," I asserted. "I never laid a hand on her." Observing Sam's expression, it seemed apparent that he didn't believe me. At that moment, I decided not to provide him with an explanation of what truly occurred. I wasn't sure if Cross's influence extended to the public defender's office, and I didn't want to take that risk. Sam expressed his view of my case. He believed that I had 3 witnesses who would testify to their version of events, and the evidence appeared to support their claims. He hinted at the possibility of convincing the district attorney to agree to a plea deal if I admitted guilt to 2 or 3 of the lesser charges during the arraignment. He mentioned that the DA would be satisfied with swiftly concluding my case without investing much effort. However, he added that admitting guilt would still subject me to civil charges from all 3 witnesses. The thought of being convicted of the charges was inconceivable to me. If found guilty in a civil court, I could face severe financial consequences. There was no way I would consider pleading guilty or accepting a plea deal. Sam, I firmly stated, you are to enter a plea of not guilty at the arraignment. Okay, Mr. Ramsey, he replied. But please remember that securing bail after being accused of shooting someone will be quite challenging. While you haven't admitted to it, the evidence gathered by the DA can convincingly point to you as the shooter. I appreciate everything you're doing for me, Sam. Based on your tone, it seems you believe I am likely guilty. However, that is not the case at this point. I chose not to mention that I possessed a video recording that could prove I acted solely in self-defense. I didn't want any knowledge of the evidence reaching the DA, or especially Stanley Cross. Instead, I instructed Sam to contact my lawyer. In reality, I didn't have a lawyer. I did, however, have an uncle who had served in the Navy Staff Judge Advocate Corps for his entire career and was now retired. He had risen through the ranks, from defense counsel as a junior officer to prosecutor, judge, and ultimately, the office of the Judge Advocate General of the United States Navy. After retiring as a captain, he moved to the San Francisco area, passed the California bar examination, and began working for a family law practice. Once retired again, he used his experience and expertise to volunteer as a children's advocate in the court system. My uncle's name was Jonathan Allen Carter, but everyone referred to him by his initials, JC, or simply GA, in my case. Since I didn't readily have Uncle Jay's contact information, I provided Sam with his name and whatever details I could remember, instructing Sam to track him down. I specifically requested that Sam not disclose my attempt to reach Uncle Jack to anyone else. He was only to inform Uncle Jack that I was facing serious legal troubles, list the charges against me, and relay that I maintained my innocence and required his assistance. Sam returned later in the afternoon and informed me that my uncle would be by my side the day after tomorrow. He also shared that Uncle Jack had advised me not to discuss my case with anyone. During the arraignment, all I needed to state was, not guilty. The following day, I was arraigned in a televised courtroom from the hospital. It appeared that many individuals had undergone arraignment in a similar manner, as the hospital ward had a dedicated room for such proceedings. As anticipated, the charges were read, and I was asked for my plea to each charge, to which I replied, not guilty. The prosecutor requested that I be detained without bail, citing my alleged dangerousness and violence. The judge, taking into account my doctor's recommendations for a 2-day stay in the hospital followed by transfer to the county jail, ordered that I remain in the hospital until then. At the subsequent hearing, a judge would determine whether or not I would stand trial. The day before my transfer to the county jail, my Uncle JC arrived. He had completed the necessary paperwork to officially represent me, securing permission to visit me in the hospital. I had never been so relieved to see a friendly face in my life. I embraced him, and tears welled up in my eyes. I hadn't realized the emotional toll the ordeal had taken until that moment. After a brief reunion, Uncle Jack got down to business. First, he requested a private room where we could speak in confidence. He then addressed some logistical matters that he believed I should know. He had briefly spoken with Lucy, who he knew in passing as a family member. Most importantly, he assured me that my children were safe. Tracy and my kids were staying with Lucy's family for the time being, at least until the police released our house for occupation. Lucy was feeling torn. While Tracy had shared her version of events and listed the charges against me, Lucy had known me throughout my marriage and found it challenging to believe everything that was being said about me. She felt relieved that Uncle Jack was here to support me. Next, Uncle Jack wanted to know precisely what had led to my current situation. In a hushed conversation, I shared with him what had truly occurred. He shook his head in disbelief, acknowledging it as an extraordinary story. I also mentioned that, sometime after my arrest, Stanley Cross, Max Engel, and my wife had conspired to create an alternative version of the events from that evening when everything unfolded. In hushed tones, I confided in Uncle Jack that I had captured everything on my iPhone. He remained calm, but I could tell he was relieved to know there might be solid evidence to support my story. The only problem was that my phone was hidden in a drawer in the kitchen of my house. Uncle Jack assured me that he would be there for me and act as my guardian angel throughout this ordeal. He emphasized that it was my primary task to focus on getting well. Meanwhile, he would carefully review the case against me, develop a defense strategy, and explore the possibility of arranging bail. I also asked him to check on my children if he could. He reassured me that he had a good relationship with Lucy and would communicate with her regarding their well-being. After being discharged from the city hospital, I was transferred to the city jail. 3 days passed without any word from Uncle Jack. Finally, I was brought before a judge, and to my surprise, Uncle Jack was present. Apparently, he had successfully argued for my release on bail, but with the condition of being under house arrest. During his absence, he had secured a townhouse in a secure community where we would both stay. However, I was restricted to the confines of the gated community. Uncle Jack had several plans in motion, although he didn't share all the details until they unfolded. He had hired a private investigative agency to assist him and had assigned them multiple leads to follow. One significant challenge was retrieving my cell phone from its hiding place in the kitchen drawer. As I was prohibited from going near my house due to the restraining order, Uncle JC firmly rejected the idea of breaking in. He believed that an opportunity would arise in due course. In the meantime, Uncle Jack had arranged a new cell phone account for both of us. This way, I had the means to contact someone if needed. One person I decided to reach out to was my neighbor, the Colonel. I informed him about my situation and asked if anything unusual had been happening around the house. Upon hearing this, Uncle Jay suggested inviting the Colonel over for some barbecue steaks and beers. During our gathering, the Colonel shared an intriguing incident. About a week after the incident, and before the house was returned to Tracy, he noticed 2 individuals dressed in dark clothing using a flashlight near the garage's walk-in door. Sensing something amiss, the Colonel called 911 to report a potential break-in. He quickly got dressed, grabbed his trusty aluminum bat, and boldly confronted the intruders with his loyal brown lab, Semper, by his side. Startled, the burglars turned around, and the Colonel managed to capture their picture. He then informed them that they had picked the wrong neighborhood to target. Despite a threatening remark from one of the intruders, they eventually fled in a black SUV parked down the block, which had its license plate concealed. The Colonel briefed the arriving police officers, who conducted an investigation before leaving. Recalling Cross's threats regarding planting drugs in my car, I was relieved that I had asked the Colonel to move it to a secure location unknown to my wife and Cross. As if one incident wasn't enough, the Colonel had yet another story to share. Just 2 days after Tracy was allowed back into the house, he spotted a black SUV parked in front. He observed 2 men conversing with Tracy near the open garage door. From their gestures, it seemed that Tracy was pointing to the empty spot where my car usually resided. After an animated discussion, the men entered the house with Tracy. 45 minutes later, they left. However, the Colonel managed to note down the license plate number of the black SUV before they departed. Uncle Jack investigated the license plate and discovered it belonged to a company called Unique Services, which claimed to be a private investigation firm. Further digging revealed that the only 2 people associated with it, Jose Gonzalez and Miguel Ortego, were former police officers. Jose had resigned under suspicions of theft from the evidence locker, while Miguel had been terminated for falsifying arrest records. Interestingly, Unique Services had Stanley Cross's law firm listed as one of its clients. It became crucial to retrieve my cell phone from the kitchen of my house. Uncle Jay had a plan. He would call Tracy and request to meet with her informally to discuss the situation. He would explain his intentions of helping both me and her, resolving several issues, and potentially reducing some charges. Tracy, initially skeptical, agreed to the meeting on the condition that one of her lawyer's associates would be present. Uncle Jack agreed without hesitation. Uncle Jack shared all the details of the meeting with me. Precisely at 6 p.m., he rang the doorbell of my home. Tracy answered promptly and invited him in. They exchanged pleasantries and even hugged briefly since they were familiar with each other from family gatherings. Tracy, dressed modestly in a knee-length skirt and a white blouse with her hair in a ponytail, excused herself briefly to bring them coffee. Once they were all seated in the spacious family room, Mr. Merritt, an associate from Stanley Cross's law firm, suggested they get down to business. Before doing so, he placed a voice recorder on the coffee table and announced his intention to record the conversation. Uncle Jack did the same, and both lawyers smiled at each other. Uncle Jack began the discussion, expressing regret that the situation had become so troubling for both Tracy and me. He emphasized that he had always regarded us as a loving couple and that it pained him to see things spiral out of control. "I feel the same way, Uncle Jake. I never wanted things to escalate like this. It's unbelievable how everything has unfolded," Tracy lamented sincerely. Jack continued speaking to me, expressing doubt about my side of the story and seeming to believe the charges against me. "You probably know," Uncle Jake continued, "that he claims that you and Mr. Cross were very close, and when he saw Cross in the house, about ready to take you to your business meeting, he just couldn't handle it anymore and became very angry. He even claims that Mr. Cross's bodyguard started it." Counselor Merritt cut in at this point. "We think the evidence, both the testimony of the participants and the physical evidence, is pretty conclusive against Mr. Blake." "I think it is, too, Mr. Merritt," Uncle Jack replied. "That is why I am asking for you, if you can, to testify that, perhaps, Blake was not thinking clearly at the time of the incident. Essentially, he acted out because he was convinced that Mr. Cross was taking his wife away from him. You can point out that up until that time, Blake had always been a great husband and father and provider." Merritt thought for a minute, then said, "We might consider something like that if Mr. Ramsey would admit to the charges against him." Uncle Jack responded, "Do you mean all of the charges? Or is there a way that some of the charges can be resolved or lessened?" "I would have to consult with Mr. Cross about that. He has a lot of influence with the DA's office. Maybe we can come back to you soon with a different solution that will make this problem go away. After all, not only would it be better for Mr. Ramsey, but Mr. Cross does not want a highly publicized legal action like this either. It is bad for his reputation and bad for business. That's all I came for, Tracy. Thank you for seeing me. Blake wants you to tell the kids that he misses them and that he loves them." Tracy seemed to sympathize with that thought, and her eyes even became a little misty. Before Uncle Jack turned off his voice recorder, he added one other thought. "I hope you realize, Tracy, that if I can prove that Blake's story is true, you would be held accountable for falsehood, obstruction of justice, and a number of other similar crimes, all of which carry jail time." Gordon Merritt was about to say something when Uncle Jack addressed him. "And you, Counselor, if I can prove that you knew your client and Mr. Cross were lying, you would also be subject to legal action as well. Before you answer, I would like you two to discuss what I said between you with that." Uncle Jake picked up his recorder and stood up. "While you're talking, would you mind if I got myself a drink of water?" No, of course not, Uncle J.C. The kitchen is through there," and Tracy pointed to door by the dining room. "There is ice water in the refrigerator if you prefer." Uncle Jack made his way to the kitchen. Once there, he verified that he could not be seen from the family room. He noisily opened the refrigerator and then quickly went to the bottom right drawer by the sink. He put his hand into the pile of folded dish towels toward the back of the drawer and felt the form of my iPhone. He quickly put it in his pocket, returned to the refrigerator, found the ice water, and poured himself a drink. After about 2 minutes, Uncle Jack walked back into the family room. "Before I go, Tracy, do you have anything at all you want to say to me?" Tracy glanced nervously at Gordon Merritt. Merritt spoke for her. "We have nothing more to say at this time, Mr. Carter. We will let you know what we come up with as far as modifying the charges against Mr. Ramsey, and we will expect you to cooperate if you want this action to go away." Uncle Jack concluded, "I can't ask more than that. Thank you for seeing me, Tracy." "I'll be seeing you in court, Mr. Merritt Uncle Jack did not bring the iPhone to the townhouse. Rather, he had made arrangements with a company called Digital Analysis Solutions DAS to analyze the contents of the phone. Uncle Jack had briefed the DAS director on the background of the case and the importance of the video-audio recording to my defense. DAS personnel assured Uncle Jack that they understood the situation and would take good care of it. They would call Uncle Jack in a few days with their analysis. A few days later, Uncle Jack and I were invited to the DAS offices to be briefed on their findings. DAS had transferred everything on my iPhone to their own server. They had, indeed, located the video in question and made several copies of it. Actually, they made about a dozen copies and stored the files on DVDs, flash drives, and on the cloud. There was no way the video was going to be lost, stolen, or taken out of existence. Uncle JC and I both watched the video for the first time. It was exactly what Uncle Jack was looking for. Audio captured all of the conversation between Tracy, Cross, and me prior to the assault. Parts of the video were shaky while I was being attacked, but it still showed that I was assaulted and I defended myself. Some unclear parts of the video were difficult to interpret, but the audio was clear enough to demonstrate what was happening. Fortunately, I had a clear video picture of Max drawing his gun on me. We thought that the briefing was over, but the DAS director told us there was more. In addition to everything that was on my cell phone before I recorded the event pictures, phone numbers, email, text, etc., there were 97 new emails sent to me that had not been opened. Also, there were 64 text messages that had been sent to my phone after the video was recorded. DAS said that they carefully analyzed all the new information on my phone without opening any files. Almost all of them came from my friends, relatives, and associates. However, there was one that was suspicious. It was received only one day after the incident and its origin could not be traced. DAS opened it on their server and found that it contained 27 inappropriate pictures of young girls and boys. If I had opened that file, the pictures would have been uploaded to my cell phone picture files. When I destroyed my computer, I said, Cross couldn't upload the photos to that, so he tried to plant them in my cell phone instead, Uncle Jack, and I thanked DS profusely for their work on our behalf. He decided to leave my cell phone with them for the time being, but he took several copies of the video with him. At home, we looked at them again. Afterwards, Uncle Jack became thoughtful. "What's bothering you, Uncle Jack?" I asked. "I'm wondering how we should proceed from this point," he answered. "If we took this evidence to the DA now, we could be pretty confident that he would drop all charges against you. Furthermore, if he wanted to pursue it, he might have a case against Cross, Max, and Tracy. More than likely, however, the DA would make it all go away, especially if Stanley Cross's influence was as strong as we suspect it is." "What is our other option?" I inquired. Thoughtfully, Uncle Jack answered, "We could let this go until we get to the hearing. The prosecutor would undoubtedly put all the conspirators on the stand and let them tell their story. Then, we could present our side and the DA would have to prosecute them all for conspiracy, falsehood, obstruction of justice, and other charges. That would be a lot of jail time, and I would get my kids amused. So what do you want to do? We could get this over tomorrow, or we can play a long game and expose them all in a complex conspiracy." I didn't hesitate. "Let's expose them all." "I was hoping you would say that, Blake. I really want to get them all into court for two reasons. 1, I want to expose them publicly. 2, I always admired the way Perry Mason would catch the culprit on the stand using their own words against them. I think every trial lawyer would love to do that. This will be my Perry Mason moment. I thought it was amusing that an experienced lawyer like Uncle Jack would have such dreamy ambitions. All that was left to do was to wait for the hearing that was scheduled in 3 weeks. Uncle Jack used that time to prepare his presentation. He mentioned to me once that there might be a slight problem getting our video admitted as evidence. If we told the prosecution what we had, they might try to prevent its use. It was Uncle Jack's decision not to reveal anything about our winning piece of evidence until the hearing. A week before the hearing, Uncle Jay had taken some time off to go back home to San Francisco and take care of his responsibilities to the court and spend time with his family. That's when I got a call from the guard at the gatehouse. "Mr. Ramsey," the guard started, "there's a woman at the gate who wants to see you. She says her name is Tracy Ramsey and that she's your wife. Should I let her through? I replied. Tell her to wait in the parking lot for a minute and I'll come out and talk to her. Yes, sir, he answered. I immediately called Uncle Jack and explained the situation. Blake, if she's here to talk, let's hear her out. Be polite and respectful. Don't touch her in any way. I don't care how long it's been since you've been intimate. Don't worry, Uncle Jack. She's toxic to me, Uncle Jack added. You know what you have to do, right? Yes, Uncle Jake, I do, I replied. After ending the call with Uncle Jake, I called the guard post and told them to let her in. In the few minutes I had before she knocked on the door, I tidied up the townhouse. There were a lot of legal papers and notes on the dining room table that I quickly moved to the bedroom. I picked up my beverage cans and cleaned the kitchen, putting everything in the dishwasher. Finally, I changed into more casual pants and a knitted sports shirt and fixed my hair. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to shave, so I had a bit of stubble on my face. I thought it made me look rugged. As soon as Tracy knocked on the door, I opened it. My first thought was that she looked great. She had clearly put in effort to dress nicely for this meeting. She wore a knee-length red pleated skirt and a pink cashmere sweater that wasn't completely buttoned up. Her hair was in a casual flip and she had on some makeup. Her lipstick and nails matched the color of her skirt. Please come in, Tracy, I said. It's nice to see you again. You look wonderful, thank you, Blake, she replied. You look good too. Actually, you look very fit and handsome. I've had lots of time to work out in the complex gym. Besides the occasional drink, I've been eating lots of fruits and vegetables and avoiding sugary foods, processed foods, and anything deep fried, I continued. Please have a seat on the sofa and I'll get you a glass of white grape juice. I was being friendly. I returned from the kitchen with a glass of white grape juice for Tracy and a glass of cranberry juice for myself. After a few sips, I asked her why she wanted to see me. I know a lot has happened between us, Blake, but I want you to know that I still love you just as much as before. I never thought things would escalate this far, I replied. I know what you wanted. You wanted me to accept being in an open relationship and allow you to be with Cross. It seemed like it could have been so simple. All you had to do was agree to let me explore with Cross. I could have had fun and still been your loving wife. And we could have even made money. After a year or so, we could have gone back to how things were before. I would have been yours forever. I'm sorry I ruined your plans, I said sarcastically. They weren't my plans. She said, so much as they were Cross's plans. He was certain he could intimidate you into complying with what he wanted. He has done it many times before, both professionally and socially. Neither he nor I anticipated the extreme physical action you would take. It was so unlike you. You have always been so laid back, easygoing and approachable that is probably why he thought I was a pushover, I deduced. You have no idea of how afraid of you I was when I saw how aggressive you were. It was a side of my character that I was trying to suppress. I had hidden it for years, ever since I was a Marine in the Middle East. It is not who I am now. Out of the blue, Tracy asked, "Where's your car?" I chuckled a little and said, "I don't know, exactly." When Cross said he would plant substances in it, I took him seriously and had it moved to someplace where he couldn't find it. Speaking of my car, what were the two men doing at the house shortly after you moved back in? They seemed to be very interested in the garage and my missing car. Tracy reluctantly answered, I think they wanted to put incriminating evidence in your car. I didn't want them to do it, but Stanley insisted that we had to bury you. You don't seem to mind stacking evidence against me. Your whole story is about to send me to prison for a long time. If you care about me like you say you do, just tell the truth and the DA will drop the charges tomorrow. I can't do that, Blake. I'm in too deep. Stanley has such a commanding personality that whatever he says is the way it is going to be. That seems to be unfortunate for me, I commented. Then it was my turn to ask a question. What is this charge against me that I abused you? From the pictures I was shown, you had cuts and bruises on your face and arms. I never touched you. Tracy volunteered. That was Stanley's idea. As soon as you stepped out on the porch, his mind was calculating an alternate scenario to what really happened. He told Max and me what our story would be. The version he put forward was this. He had come to the house to pick me up for a business dinner. You had become irrational and accused me and Stanley of having an affair, whereupon you started to hit me. When Stanley intervened, the two of you got into a fight and he broke your nose and blackened your eye. He was kicked in the groin and hit in the face with a gun you had hidden in your clothes. When Max heard the commotion, he entered the house to help both me and Stanley, but you shot him before he could intervene. To make the story seem plausible, he hit me several times in the face before I could say anything. We've gotten together several times over the last several weeks to practice our story, so there are no holes in it. I'm sorry, Blake Tracy cried. I didn't want this. I want you and me to be like we were before. Well, I said. That's not going to happen. There's a way out. Blake Tracy seemed earnest. Stanley has done a lot of research on you. He knows you are a war hero. He knows you've been exposed to war and violence and killing. He also knows that you have been diagnosed with severe PTSD. He wants you to plead guilty based on your PTSD history. He said he will use his influence with the DA and with the court to get you committed to a VA hospital where you can get treatment. After a year or maybe less, you would be released as cured. I would be waiting for you, Blake. We could start again with our children and have a good long life together. Just you and me and the kids, so. This was the real reason she came to talk with me. She wanted me to go voluntarily with the promise that Cross would help me get a minimum sentence in a VA psychiatric ward. I didn't believe any of it, but I didn't let Tracy know that. Instead, I played along. That sounds good to me, Tracy, but you'll have to let me think about it for a while. Also, I will need to talk to Uncle Jack. I think he might go for it too. He seems to have so little in the way of evidence to help compared to the testimony of you, Cross, and Max. Please do this for yourself. Blake Tracy added, do it for you and me and the kids. In a few years, it will seem like it never happened. It will have been just a bump in the road. I doubt that. I said. You betrayed me for months. You wanted me to be submissive to your boss. You threatened to take my babies away from me if I didn't comply. And you brought false charges against me that will put me in jail for many years. That is a big bump in the road. That's why I want you to take Stanley's offer. It's the easiest way out for all of us. Tracy was teary-eyed. Like I said, I'll think about it. I added for the last time. We were done. I suggested it was time she left. Tracy, however, put her hand on mine and said, maybe we could relax together for a few minutes. I've missed you in my bed. Is there a chance that we could sleep together tonight and forget what's happening around us, at least for a few hours? That's not going to happen, Tracy, I responded. It was obvious that I was adamant, and Tracy took the hint. Please, take Stanley's offer, she said. I escorted her to the door. Before she left, she gave me a hug. I think she meant it. It actually felt good, but I didn't return the embrace. The purpose of the hearing was to determine whether or not I was to be held over for trial. The prosecution was supremely confident. Predictably, they put Cross, Max, and Tracy on the stand where they retold their well-rehearsed versions of events. Uncle Jack asked each witness only one question. Do you swear to the truth of your testimony? Each of the three said that they did. Uncle Jack wanted to expose Jose and Miguel, as well as the primary three witnesses, but trying to prove that they were co-conspirators and trying to frame me was not relevant to the particular charges against me. This was especially true because their efforts to frame me all failed. When the prosecution rested, it was time for Uncle Jack to do his thing. With the court's permission, Uncle Jack started. The defense would like to enter a video of the events in question into evidence. This evidence proves my client's innocence, Your Honor. Immediately, the ADA jumped up and stated that this is new evidence that has not been presented to the prosecution for examination. There was a reason for that, Uncle Jace explained. The defense is concerned that the Office of the District Attorney and the court are biased against my client and would unfairly suppress our evidence. Do you have any evidence that the Office of the District Attorney is compromised, Mr. Carter? The judge asked. The evidence is in the video, Your Honor. Uncle Jace responded. Then you and the prosecution will retire to my chambers, where I will review the video and make a judgment as to its admissibility. The judge started to get up when Uncle Jace spoke up. No, Your Honor. We won't do that, and why not? The judge said. He was beginning to get angry that someone would disobey him in his court. Because, Your Honor, the defense does not believe that the court is totally impartial, and we will not take that chance that you decide to suppress our evidence. Are you suggesting that the court might be dishonest, Mr. Carter? May be dishonest? Your Honor, do you have any proof to support your claim, Mr. Carter? Or is that proof also available in the video? As a matter of fact, it is, Your Honor. However, I can give you an example of what I mean if you answer a few questions for me just to clarify, Mr. Carter. You think you can demonstrate that this court has a bias against your client by asking me a few questions. Is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor, Uncle Jay stated. All right, Mr. Carter, go ahead with your questions. However, if you fail to prove your point, we will watch the video privately, and I will make a decision on whether to admit it as evidence. I agree to that, Your Honor. But please be aware that if this video is deemed inadmissible for this trial, and my client is convicted solely based on the testimony of the 3 prosecution witnesses, I will release this video to news outlets and the internet, regardless of the court's orders. Furthermore, the evidence in this video is significant enough that your integrity could be questioned if it remains undisclosed. I feel as though I'm being threatened, Mr. Carter, the judge said. Without waiting for the judge to become angrier, Uncle Jake asked, Your oldest son is in college, correct, Your Honor? He's at the Air Force Academy, right? Yes, the judge responded. He's a first-year student. Admissions to the Air Force Academy are highly competitive, aren't they? The judge confirmed that they were. First, your son had to apply to your district's congressman or a senator. After that, he had to take a civil service exam. Based on the results, he received a nomination along with 9 other applicants. Then, he underwent a medical exam, a physical fitness test, as well as pilot and navigator aptitude assessments at a nearby Air Force base. Additionally, he had to take the college entrance scholastic aptitude tests. Is all of that correct, Your Honor? Yes, the judge responded. He was an A- student in high school and was on the swim team every year. It's understandable that you would be proud of him. Your Honor, make your point, Mr. Carter, the judge said. Your son's application package also included 3 recommendation letters, right? That is correct, Mr. Carter. Who were those letters from, Your Honor? Let's see, 1 was from his swim coach and 1 was from his math teacher. Who wrote the 3rd letter? Your Honor, the judge stayed silent for a moment before speaking. Mr. Stanley Cross wrote my son a very enthusiastic recommendation for the Air Force Academy. Mr. Cross must have known your son quite well, unless he composed a letter filled with falsehoods. Uncle Jack stated. My son worked at Mr. Cross's office during his sophomore and junior summers in high school. He aspires to become a lawyer someday. So Mr. Cross is more of an acquaintance than a close family friend. He is more of an acquaintance and a fellow professional in some legal organizations I belong to now. Your Honor, you can understand why the defense questions your impartiality in this case. Uncle Jack concluded his questioning. The judge responded, You have put me in a position where my personal integrity is being doubted, counselor. Let me assure you that any association I had or have with Mr. Cross will not influence my decision-making process. However, you have made it a matter of perception. The judge remained quiet for a minute before looking up and saying, Play your video. Counselor. Uncle Jay signaled the bailiff to dim the lights in the courtroom and lower 2 large projection screens on either side of the judge's bench. Uncle Jack looked at me and said, It's showtime. Blake. He pressed the enter button, and the video began to play. The entire incident unfolded on the video for the judge, the prosecution, and the spectators in the courtroom. When the video reached the part where Cross was threatening me and said, I know most of the senior police officials personally. I am friends with many of the attorneys in the DA's office. In fact, I have even fooled around with a few of them. There was an audible gasp from the prosecution's side. The assistant district attorney put her head down on the table and started sobbing. We all watched her for a few moments before she stood up, gathered her papers into her briefcase, and hurriedly left the courtroom, still crying. Uncle Jay continued with the video. Cross, Max, and Tracy tried to leave the courtroom discreetly, but they were easily noticed. The judge sternly ordered them to stay where they were. The remaining assistant district attorneys watched the video until the end. The lead prosecutor quickly stood up once the video concluded. It was clear he wanted a recess, but before he could request it, Uncle Jack said, I have another video. Without waiting for permission, Uncle Jack queued up the second video, explaining that it had been recorded 2 weeks earlier when my wife came to visit me at my townhouse. He then pressed enter and the video began playing. Tracy instantly grasped the significance of the video. On it, she confessed to everything that Cross had attempted to do to me. She screamed, Blake, How could you betray me like this? After a few minutes, Cross also realized the damning nature of the video. You stupid person. You foolish, foolish person. You allowed him to record you. What were you thinking, he said aloud. Tracy didn't realize that when she visited me, I had set up my iPhone to record everything she said. The phone had been placed on the coffee table in front of her, hidden beneath books and papers. I turned it on just before opening the door to let her in. The assistant district attorney did request a recess to assess the new evidence. Uncle J.C. provided the AEDA with copies of the videos on DVD discs. Court was adjourned until the following morning. When court resumed the next morning, the 3 prosecution witnesses were notably absent. Instead of an acting district attorney, the actual district attorney for the county was present at the prosecution's table. The judge allowed him to speak first. I will be brief, Your Honor, he began. First, all charges against Mr. Ramsey have been dropped. We believe he acted in self-defense when he confronted Mr. Cross and Mr. Angel. It was a rather aggressive act of self-defense, but it was self-defense nonetheless. Second, my office has issued arrest warrants for Mr. Stanley Cross, Mr. Max Angel, and Mrs. Blake Ramsey on charges of conspiring to commit perjury, inducing perjury, perjury itself, assault with the intent to cause serious harm, making false verbal and written statements to the police, filing fraudulent complaints, and obstructing justice. In addition, my office has been made aware that Mr. Cross attempted to plant false evidence against Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Angel, and Mrs. Ramsey were aware of this plot. We have also identified 2 individuals employed by Mr. Cross who executed the attempts to plant false evidence, and they are currently being apprehended. Stanley Cross, Max Angel, and my wife were all arrested. Eventually, they made bail. The district attorney was furious to learn about Stanley Cross's long-standing corruption within his organization, and he was determined to root out any colleagues who had any ambiguous connections to Cross. All defendants were eventually convicted. Stanley Cross was the only one who pleaded not guilty, which turned out to be a mistake since both Max and Tracy pleaded guilty and testified against Cross. In the end, Stanley Cross received an 11-year prison sentence, while Max was sentenced to 7 years. Tracy received a 3-year sentence. Tracy's original sentence was 5 years, but Uncle Jake arranged for me to speak on her behalf. I explained that during the altercation, Tracy had warned me that Cross was planning to attack me from behind with a fireplace poker, and without her intervention, there was a significant possibility that I would have been killed. Jose and Miguel were arrested for attempting to obstruct justice and tampering with evidence. As part of their arrests, the police seized their files and computers. On one of the computers, they discovered a folder containing images of minors, the same folder they had attempted to upload to my cell phone. The district attorney played one against the other until Miguel cracked and confessed, hoping for a more lenient sentence from the judge. Both of them received lengthy prison sentences. Stanley Cross remained in the county jail until he was transferred to a state prison to commence his sentence. Max and Tracy, on the other hand, were granted 2 weeks to sort out their affairs before surrendering to the sheriff and being taken into custody. Max spent his time preparing his family for 7 years without him. If he maintained good behavior, his lawyer informed him that he may be eligible for parole after 4 years. Given her relatively short sentence, Tracy would serve her time at a jail annex situated in a rural area of the county. This arrangement had also been coordinated by Uncle J.C. with the courts. I allowed Tracy to stay at our house with the kids while I stayed in the townhouse until she had to go away. She spent the time bonding with them and preparing them for her long absence. They were a little too young to fully understand everything that was happening, but they knew that Mommy had made a mistake and she had to go away for a while. On the day before Tracy was supposed to report to the sheriff, she asked me to come by the next morning after she sent the kids off to school. She wanted me to bring all my clothes back with me and be ready to move into the house. I showed up at 9 a.m. and rang the bell. Tracy answered with, "You didn't have to ring the bell to come in. This is your house." Tracy was dressed in a simple black knee-length skirt, a white blouse, and a light gray sweater. She was wearing flat-heeled shoes. She wore very little makeup and her hair was in a simple ponytail. Her eyes were red, and I was certain she had been crying most of the time since she sent the kids to school. However, She had managed to hold back her tears for our meeting and was doing a good job of holding herself together. I noticed a small overnight bag sitting by the front door. With a slight sense of humor, Tracy said, "That's all I'm taking with me. I think the state is going to provide everything I need for a while." Tracy invited me into the kitchen, where she had a light breakfast prepared. I sat at the kitchen table while she served a continental breakfast of rolls with honey and jam, a fruit cup, milk and coffee, and a glass of orange juice. The conversation started off with small talk. She told me that Lucy was coming by at 11 a.m. to take her downtown to the sheriff's office. She emphasized that Lucy was more than willing to help with the kids in any way she could. In fact, Lucy had volunteered to step in as a mother figure for the kids for the next few years, and that I should not hesitate to take her up on her offer. She wanted me to be all moved in by the time the kids returned home from school. She wanted their lives to continue as uninterrupted as possible. Tracy was unsure about visitations while she was away. She didn't want her children to see her in prison clothes, but she couldn't imagine not seeing them for 3 years. Also, she promised to write often, and she wanted me to promise that the kids would write to her every week or so. She asked me to send pictures of them as they grew up. Tracy mentioned that she had packed all of her belongings into plastic bins and stored them in the basement storage room. However, she had left a family photo of all of us, taken a year or so ago, in each of the kids' bedrooms so they wouldn't forget her. She continued by telling me that she had ordered a new king-sized bed for the master bedroom. It had arrived a few days earlier and was completely set up. She said that no one had slept on it. She had even purchased all new sheets and blankets, as well as a new comforter. As she talked, tears welled up in her eyes. Up to this point, we had not discussed ourselves. When she started to clear the table, I told her to stop and that I would take care of it later. I suggested that we go into the family room with our coffees. She looked at her watch and realized she only had a short time left. Tracy was very sorry for what had happened. She reminded me more of the woman I had married than the person she became under the influence of Stanley Cross. "Blake," she started, "I cannot express how truly sorry I am for my actions and the way I treated you. You were an amazing husband, father, and provider. You were my closest friend and a wonderful partner. I forgot all of that ... and I deeply regret it now. I take full responsibility for what happened. Even though Stanley Cross influenced me, I made the choices that led me down a destructive path. I am incredibly ashamed. It's hard for me to even face you now, let alone our families, friends, and especially the children. In a way, I'm relieved that I will be in a place where I don't have to confront you, and you don't have to see me. I know you'll never forget what I did, but I hope that with time, it will become a distant memory, and maybe someday, you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. That's what I'm holding on to now." Tracy finished speaking, and she held back her tears long enough to ask me if I wanted more coffee. I stood up and faced her, coming close enough to put my hands on her shoulders and embrace her. She wrapped her arms around me tightly ... and she cried. We held each other silently for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, her sobbing turned into intermittent sniffles, until she finally calmed down and rested peacefully in my arms. We stayed that way until we heard a car horn outside. "That must be Lucy," Tracy said. I asked her to honk instead of coming to the door. "I have to leave now." She pulled away from me, wiped the tears from her face, and collected her sweater and suitcase. As she opened the door to go, she turned and said, "I love you, Blake." I lingered in the doorway as Tracy walked towards Lucy's car. Lucy waved at me without a smile, and I waved back. In just a few moments, they were out of sight. For the remainder of the morning, I focused on organizing my belongings in the house. About 2 hours later, Lucy called to check if I needed anything. Feeling the need for company, I asked her to come over. Plus, we needed to discuss our roles in raising my children. Epilogue: over time, both the kids and I adjusted to life without Tracy at home. Essentially, I took on the role of a single father. My main priority was the happiness and well-being of Tyler, Beth, and Emily. Luckily, Lucy provided tremendous support and became a mother figure for the children. Lucy and I decided to give Tracy about a month to settle into her new environment before we visited her. Lucy went first and took the kids along. When they returned, they couldn't stop talking about the visit. Lucy mentioned that Tracy was overwhelmed with emotion at seeing her children again. She explained that the visit was not as traumatic as we had expected. The women's section of the prison had a day room where the female inmates could spend time with their loved ones. It was a large area equipped with comfortable sofas, tables, and toys for the little ones. The inmates were allowed to wear civilian clothes rather than their prison uniforms, giving the meeting a more casual atmosphere. Additionally, there was an enclosed area outside the day room with picnic tables, allowing families to have lunch together. When I visited for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised by the relaxed environment and grateful that Tracy could reunite with her children in such a setting. I saw Tracy for the first time during the 3rd month of her incarceration. She appeared genuinely happy to see me, and to my surprise, I felt the same way. Her attitude was positive and hopeful, especially when we were with the kids. In private, she expressed deep remorse for her actions and assured me that she would never forgive herself. She didn't expect me to forgive her either. During one of our visits, one of Tracy's friends approached our table and introduced herself as Candy. Tracy explained that Candy was her nickname among friends. She said that after everyone discovered she had a loving husband, a happy home, and cherished children, but still betrayed it all for a scandalous affair, they dubbed her Dummy. It seemed that in prison, she was considered the least intelligent person. Tracy revealed that the type of life she had willingly given up was what most of the female inmates could only dream of but never attain. A year passed by, and through legal channels, we received news that Tracy might be granted parole in as little as another year. Lucy and I decided it was time to make long-term plans for her return. Uncle Jack suggested that because of Tracy's legal training, she might be interested in taking online courses to become a paralegal. There was a shortage of paralegals in the local law firms, and it could potentially be a well-paying career for Tracy. She embraced the idea and enrolled in online courses offered by the University of Virginia. In the meantime, Lucy and I helped Tracy find a small 2-bedroom townhouse with a garage. It was conveniently located near our house, the courthouse, and the surrounding law offices in the city. With a reasonable investment, we managed to purchase the property with a mutual agreement that Tracy would repay us for our assistance in securing her new home. On the day of her release, Lucy went alone to pick her up since the paperwork and procedures weren't conducive to a family gathering. When Lucy drove Tracy to her new house, they were greeted by a banner that read "Welcome Home." Tracy couldn't hold back her emotions. By the time she stepped out of the car, she was completely overwhelmed. Her family was there to meet her, including her parents, my parents, and of course the kids. Even Uncle Jack and his wife joined us. I chose to remain in the background as the kids proudly showed their mother around the new home, modestly equipped with second-hand furniture. They eventually made their way to the back patio, where I had prepared a barbecue for us, with hamburgers sizzling on the grill. We handed Tracy a glass of wine and settled her into a comfortable chair as the guest of honor. The kids served her a meal of hamburgers, potato salad, and beans. Gradually, Tracy's tears subsided, and she embraced the joyous atmosphere. She expressed her gratitude to everyone for their acceptance of her, despite her past actions. We all avoided bringing up her mistakes, focusing instead on hope and new beginnings. Uncle Jack took her aside at one point and informed her that he had lined up several interviews for her with different law firms. He encouraged her to draft a resume and a cover letter to present to potential employers. Additionally, he recommended a particular law firm, a family practice that he believed would align with her interests. Tracy couldn't thank him enough. After Tracy had settled in for about a week, and after she had been hired by the law firm Uncle Jack referred her to, she invited me to her house for dinner, just the two of us. I arrived with a bottle of wine, and she embraced me at the door. Tracy had prepared my favorite dinner, a simple meatloaf with potatoes au gratin and peas. During the meal, we spoke about everything except what she truly wanted to discuss. We talked about the kids, my work, her work, and even the weather. After dinner, we moved to the family room, where Tracy had soft background music playing from a music channel on the TV. "I asked you over tonight, Blake," she began, "because I wanted to talk about us. Or rather, about you and me. What do you think will happen to us? I'm finding it hard to picture our future." I responded, "I don't have a crystal ball either, Tracy. But here's what I believe is most likely: we will continue to raise our children together as a team. I think they need you just as much as they need me." To be honest, Having you back has lifted a weight off my shoulders. I finally have some free time that I didn't have before, and I believe you will appreciate having some time to yourself without the constant presence of the kids. Unlike you, I've had a decent social life. Nothing too serious, but it was nice to go out on a date for dinner and a movie once in a while. When you're more settled, I think you'll also enjoy being more socially active. Tracy interrupted, "Do you think you would ever consider being with me again, but for the long term?" I replied, "If you mean getting married to you again, the answer is no. Too much has happened for me to ever consider being your spouse again. However, I have moved on from what happened in the past, and I look forward to always being friends without any romantic involvement." But we will never be more than that. Tracy looked down, and a few tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't think so, but I had to ask. What I expect is that in the next few years, I'll become more sociable and start dating more seriously. Sooner or later, I'll meet another woman that I can truly love. She may be single, divorced, or widowed. She may or may not have children. But I'll meet someone and eventually propose to her, and I believe the same will happen to you. As you adjust to your new life, you'll eventually meet someone that you can love. And that person will propose to you. All of this won't stop us from seeing each other often, because we'll always have our children to keep us connected. We'll be together for birthdays, holidays, and maybe even vacations. In the future, there will be graduations and weddings. That's the best we can hope for in terms of being together. Maybe that's more than I deserve," Tracy said sadly. "But I can find happiness in that future. Before you leave, I want you to know how grateful I am for how you've treated me since I've been back home. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had completely avoided me and kept the children away from me. But you didn't. You didn't, because that's not the kind of person you are. It makes me even more regretful for what I tried to do to you as I opened the door to leave." I responded, "You may or may not have noticed, Tracy, but I have forgiven you. I hold no ill feelings towards you at all. With time, I hope you can forgive yourself." "Maybe, with time I can do that, but it won't happen soon," Tracy replied. Simultaneously, we embraced each other. We held each other in the embrace for several minutes without saying a word. I let go of her, and without any further words, I stepped outside into the fresh air, found my car, and drove home.